Do a kid care check-in. I like your hair. You got it. Very nice. I like it.
Okay. Right. Oh, like a got the check.
Right.
Oh, excellent.
Did she mess anything up or no?
Not so far.
All right, good.
Last Thursday with the update.
Okay.
So, yeah, so far
So far, so good.
I'm not tripping on any sidewalks.
That's
so
very
far.
good.
So.
It's
No.
important.
And this-
Do you have any?
Nope.
Oh. Yes.
Not better.
Oh. I could not attend. Did you go to planning and zoning? The hearing, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
It's just not a thing.
Yeah. That were. Yeah. You're allowed to say no. It's not a slippery slope. You know, once it happens, it's done, right? Everybody can do it. No, I can make.
Right, exactly.
I can make decisions. Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody set?
Yes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this special meeting of the combined workshop of your board, combined workshop and special meeting of your Board of Trustees. In order to recognize the men and women in uniform who serve and protect our community, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Horvath, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Madam President. Start with Trustee Chen,
Here.
Trustee Fink,
Here.
Trustee John,
Here.
Trustee Rudolph,
Here.
Trustee Sifferman,
Here.
and Trustee Terrell.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Does any trustee have an addition or deletion to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, and before we open the floor up to citizen comments, I'd like to take a moment to recognize two gentlemen who recently passed away. Both were wonderful servants of the village and its residents, and I'd like to recognize them with a moment of silence. The first gentleman, Louis Schauer, is a former village president. He passed away late in December. I didn't know him, but I understand he was an accomplished attorney. He was the village attorney first and then became village president and served in that capacity from 1981 to 1985. He also had many other interests, including Brookfield Zoo and our Theater of Western Springs, where he served on the very first theater board there. So in recognition of his contribution to the village, we donated to the theater in his honor. And then we just learned today that Dick Skoda, a longtime fixture at the village, passed away over the weekend. He served 25 years here, first as firefighter and then as public works director. Services will be held for him at Hallowell and James this Wednesday. So let's please have a moment of silence for these two remarkable individuals. Thank you. Now we'll move on to citizens' comments. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board this evening? Good evening.
James Holderman. Moira Zellner, who's the liaison, was going to come. Her daughter's a little bit under the weather, so I will be, hopefully if I run a little bit long, it won't be very long, I can get through just what I want to discuss with the board. So the first issue is the list of items that the Stop 5G group formally submitted to both the Planning and Zoning and the board on January 27th for the board. If there is a timeline to get those requests and suggestions, answered and back to us, we would be interested in that. And then also, if the board could provide a timeline for voting on the, drafting and voting on the ordinance, making it as strict as possible as we have requested. The second item is the town hall meeting and any RSVPs that have been received. I believe those were due today, could the village make that, both the yeses and nos, available on the website as soon as possible? And then the last issue is with regard to item 8 on the agenda, the resolution. I had called and spoke to Deputy Clerk Haskey regarding getting a copy of the resolution. And I was told that Attorney Jerusik had said that it is still in draft form as of 2 o'clock, 5 hours prior to the meeting, and that I could not have a copy and I would have to see it after it's passed or voted on. This is my first sort of experience with Western Springs, and I can tell you that in Burr Ridge, they post the meeting packets, which are subject to FOIA, prior to the board meetings so that the public can potentially comment on it, ask for something to be held for a future vote or something like that, so that there could be input, prior to the board taking action on one of those items. So I would request that the board direct Attorney Jerusik or staff to put the meeting packets that the trustees get on the village website prior to, Friday, whenever the agenda is posted. I think that would be very helpful so that we don't have to constantly be submitting FOIAs for things like that. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to talk to the board this evening?
Good evening. My name is Nicole, and these are my questions that I would like a response
May I have your
on.
last name too, please?
Sure, Christensen.
Thank you.
Who owns the small wireless telecommunications facilities on our water tower? Who has the contracts with these telecommunications companies? And at what frequencies are these facilities running? And if our town has the contract, how much money are we getting per year from each company? Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board this evening? Good evening.
Adam Urson, resident. This is becoming like a part-time job for me. This is a 3-time hat trick of visiting you all. But this small, yeah, thank you, not alone. We all care because this small cell 5G situation has struck a chord with us. And I do want to say something that you might not be expecting, which is like market improvement this week, more communication, more progress. I think there are some folks who work for the village who are doing good work here, making forward progress, and I want to acknowledge that. I have a couple things, which is, number one, I think we should, you all should seriously consider denying the permit for the lead core application. To me, it looks clearly like the first step in laying the groundwork with fiber for the small cell 5G project. The application to me looks wholly incomplete, and so I ask that you all take a real good look at that in that permit application. Number two, again, I appreciate the town hall meeting. I think it'd be great to understand the RSVP list and who's coming, so we have a chance to speak to those people. And I ask again that at that meeting we have the chance to stand up and speak and have a two-way conversation. So thank you for that consideration. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments about staff. Staff has been working very hard on this, so appreciate that. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board this evening? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to a consideration of the agenda items during the workshop portion of tonight's meeting. First up is Properties and Rec. Trustee Chen.
Yes, thank you. My report from the Properties and Recreation Committee includes background and recommendation for several items that will probably be on the agenda on our next board meeting. If you'll notice, over half of your board packet was documents related to what we considered in the Properties and Rec Committee. Two of the biggest documents that I'll talk about are the agreement with BNSF, which also includes an easement agreement for the West Underpass. And also the second item is a proposal for the Phase 3 engineering for the West Underpass, proposed West Underpass. So. But firstly, the first item was an agreement between the village and the Healing Hearts for Ashley Foundation in regards to the 2020 and 2021 Tower Trot events. There's someone here from the Healing Hearts Foundation, yes, and I'll have him come speak, and then I'll give you more details. So this is Matt Jurjevec. Okay, I was like, gonna really do it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm here on behalf of the Healing Hearts for Ashley Foundation. Many of you know that our foundation has been the benefiting charity for the Western Spring Tower Trot for the last 2 years. My late wife, Ashley Jurjevec, was a teacher at McClure. She passed away suddenly in 2016 from an undetected heart condition called ARVC. So we've been working with Lurie's Children's Hospital and a specific group called the Cardiovascular Genetics Group to help raise money to detect these undetected heart conditions through genetic sequencing. And our foundation has raised over $136,000 to support the research in the last 2 years. The Tower Trot alone has actually helped us raise $53,000 in the last 2 years, and we've been able to acquire about 40 sponsors a year to help with that benefit. So we're very excited to work with Western Springs again to be partners in the next 2 years to help raise money for the foundation and work in the community where she taught. So,
Thank you.
you guys have any questions for the foundation or anything?
I just want to say we're honored to partner with you. We feel that connection with your wife and her service at McClure. So we appreciate the opportunity to partner with you and look forward to many more years to come.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you
That's
guys.
it. Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, just as a slight background, the foundation was a partner with the Tower Trot for 2018 and 2019, and it went well. As he said, they provide about 40 volunteers for the race, which is very helpful for the administration of the race. They solicit sponsors for the race. Those sponsors supply all the snacks at the finish line, and any excess funds solicited then go to the Healing Hearts for Ashley Foundation. The Recreation Department registers race participants, and fees collected go towards the race costs, such as the timing and all of the things with the administration of the race. So I believe at our next board meeting, we will approve the agreement between the village and Healing Hearts for Ashley Foundation. So, okay, so the next item, there were several annual contract renewals that we discussed in committee, and we discussed the contracts in detail, myself and Trustee Terrell, and based on staff recommendations, the committee approves renewing these contracts. Briefly, an HVAC preventative maintenance services contract for $19,000, a janitorial services for the Public Works and the garage for $31,499 and $3,000 respectively, with Unimax Management Corp. Landscaping services from Brightview LLC for $34,700. I know I'm going to group the next three items because they all involve trees. One is an annual tree trimming service contract from Winkler for $105,000. Another is a tree removal contract from Homer Tree Care for $75,000. And lastly, a contract for an emerald ash borer treatment from True Green for $16,000. We discussed this a little bit during committee, and we learned about when the insects get attracted to these trees and how they then destroy them. And it's estimated that we have about 500 of these ash trees in Western Springs. So we're trying, this contract will treat about 250 this year, so we kind of do it on the schedule. And they treat them by injecting a chemical in the trunk of the tree that will, I guess, protect against this insect that will attack these trees. So, and I think, you know, on a going forward, we're not planting any more ash trees. I'm pretty sure that's probably the case. So, but these are just the ones that we have in our inventory right now. So,
May I ask, 500 now, how many trees did we have, did we lose?
Ooh, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know how many we lost. When we started this process, probably about 5 years ago now, what the village did, we went through the town, did do a survey of all the ash trees, so just the ash trees, and we identified the ones that were in the best condition. Those were the ones that we targeted for treatments. Because once the tree's infected, the ash borer treatment doesn't remove the infection. So we looked for the trees that were in the best condition, didn't have any infection, targeted to treat those, and then the ones that were already infected or in poor condition, we let those phase out. Our ultimate goal is not to treat the ash trees forever, but to avoid a situation where we have to clear cut any, block or subdivision area. But over time, ultimately start replacing those ash trees with more diverse species.
Thank you.
yeah, okay.
Do we have certain blocks where we have several of the ash tree altogether, like to your point of like?
Yeah, the one that sticks out to me off the top of my mind is over on Linden, just north of Hillgrove.
Okay.
That block or two area is almost predominantly all ash trees. There's not a lot of other areas that are completely blanketed like that in town, that we have done a good job of diversifying other areas, but those are trees that were probably installed 50 plus years ago, and they just did that whole block area.
Okay. Thanks.
So, and also the tree trimming does happen in the winter because the trees are dormant. Yes, and I would note that we also just got a grant that we talked about in other board meetings where we're doing an inventory of our trees. And is that happening right now?
That process has not started yet. We are
Okay.
coordinating to go out to bid for that,
Oh,
and then
right,
that will
yes.
happen probably sometime later this spring.
Okay. So that was all those contracts related to trees, and a good discussion there. The next item is maintenance and repair to the Public Works High Ranger vehicle, which is a vehicle that has a high crane thing, and it's used to work on trees or on street lights. And it's had some maintenance that needs to be done to it, and we've got a proposal for $7,000 for that vehicle. And then the purchase of a John Deere tractor to replace the other vehicle that we discussed declaring as surplus. This vehicle will be used for snow removal on the train platform and commercial district. It was included in the 2020 budget, and the cost is $35,000 for this John Deere tractor. So that's that. Okay, next item, which was in your packet, that very large draft underpass agreement with BNSF, and which includes an easement agreement. Again, this is with BNSF for the proposed pedestrian underpass under the tracks at Prospect Avenue, which I'll refer to going forward as the West Underpass. We were told the agreement is being reviewed by Attorney Jarusik, and to maintain the schedule of an April 24th, 2020 bid letting for the project, the board needs to approve and execute the agreement and get it to the Illinois Department of Transportation, IDOT, by March 2nd. So I believe that will be forthcoming. And then the second very large document that was in your packet and staff recommends approval is the West Underpass Phase 3 engineering agreement with Christopher B. Burke Engineering. And the cost of that proposal is $185,000. Again, Phase 3 engineering is construction supervision, material review, and required submittals to state and federal agencies. So it's the construction management while construction is ongoing. So, the West Underpass is scheduled to appear on the IDOT April bid letting, with construction tentatively scheduled for the summer, but in committee we discussed there's a lot of moving pieces to how that might happen or not happen, depending on various parties, including BNSF, who has a very big window for the work that they have to do prior to when we can start doing our work. Yes, it was, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
phases.
Yes.
There's some preliminary work our contractor would do up
Yes.
front. The BN would come in,
Yes.
construct the bulk of the actual bridge decking for the
Right.
underpass, and then the
And then
Phillips
we
contractor
come
would
back
on the
after.
back.
Okay. Well, we discussed it at length, and I just will note, we also discussed at length in committee that there is the potential for a lot of construction projects in the Spring Rock area. So not only the Shoe Fly Bridge, perhaps this West Underpass, which is also in that area, perhaps Central Avenue, and then, of course, perhaps the pedestrian overpass that is being constructed. So there's a lot of activity potentially in that area. So we discussed that in committee. So I think that's all I'm going to say about that for now. But both of those agreements we'll have to take action on the BNSF agreement, and then we'll have to. Do we have to approve the proposal for the Phase 3 engineering? Yes.
Yes, that would be for this
That would be
month's.
for the next board meeting. Okay, and then lastly, a couple capital summary reports that there's no material updates on the historical water tower front door or the East Train platform, and we're still awaiting an IDOT response on an issue that they raised for the Wolf Road bike path. And finally, now in our capital reports, the West Underpass is appearing in our capital summary reports. So, and again, the stage of that is Phase 3 engineering proposal. So, is there any questions on any of those things?
Nope, go ahead. Nope.
Just confirming on all the contract renewals as well as the High Ranger maintenance, all of those, I'm assuming, are falling within the expected budget.
A good question.
That
I
is-
assume
yes,
so.
they are.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I assume so, just
Yes.
wanted to confirm that they all do. Thank you.
Okay.
Trustee Chen,
Oh, yes.
there's surplus equipment that needs to be declared.
Oh, yes. Oh, did I miss that one?
H.
Okay.
H, yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, yes, the dump trucks. We did talk about that. Oh, I guess I missed that in my notes, but we did talk about the 2 dump trucks that are pretty old that need to be declared surplus. Yes. So that is something. Thank you,
Okay.
guys.
So we'll put that on the omnibus for
Okay,
next week.
yes,
next
please.
time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to Public Works and
Yep.
Water.
I think we have a question.
Oh,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No.
Oh,
Oh, sure. Hi, Lisa.
Lisa Van Pesten, resident. I just was curious of how the BNSF West Underpass agreement compared to the East Underpass agreement, other than dates, obviously.
I mean, in short, it's actually a completely different document. The agreement process is very much different. Unfortunately, I wasn't here myself when we did that East Underpass, but we've been working quite a bit with the BN since this past fall, trying to work through that agreement. So my understanding with working with Attorney Jerusik is the document is a completely different document, and the BN is handling these sorts of projects a different way than they did a decade ago.
And I would agree with that 100%. Yes.
Sure. Okay, now moving on to Public Works and Water Committee. Trustee Fink.
We'll recommend the renewal of 4 contracts. So these contracts, they don't need to go out to bid if we're happy with the service that we had in the past year. So the first one is the sidewalk saw cutting, and this is just the effort to make all the sidewalks level, so it's less of a tripping hazard. So if it's over 1.5 inches of discrepancy between the 2 pieces, it's considered a tripping hazard. So the contract is for $28.50 per inch foot. The second renewal is with Strata Construction for the sidewalk replacement, and this is for the 60-40 split with residents if you have a damaged piece of concrete, and that's not to exceed $76,612.50. And then renewing this, the street sweeping and disposal services with Lakeshore Recycling for $71,045.69. And then continuing smoke testing with RJN, and that is when they put in smoke in the sewer lines to make sure stormwater and sanitary water is separated. And that's not to exceed $19,998.88. The 2020 motor fuel tax, if approved, hopefully we can, it'll be approved so we can start in March. So the area is 40th Street, picture it, from Johnson to Franklin, and 40th Street from Ellington to Gilbert, Willow Street from Western to Hampton, and Walnut Street, the Walnut Street alley between Walnut and Reed Street. So we'd like to accept the proposal for Phase 2 and 3 for design and construction to Christopher B. Burke, not to exceed $64,920. Capital summary, the Ridgewood Oaks Detention Basin. So that is going out to bid in February with hopefully we can have information in March for our March meeting. So we're waiting on meeting with the Homeowners Association to have a community meeting to figure out the special service agreement. The longer this takes, just all of the costs are going up, so there's the big push to kind of get this completed. As far as the wells, well 5 drilling and the transmission main, both the work is completed and just coordinating the final payment with the IEPA. The well 5 electrical and pumping equipment. So we have the construction permits, and now we're just waiting for the IEPA notice to proceed, which we can't do anything until we receive that. Since we're waiting on that, unfortunately, we're already 4 weeks behind schedule with that. The standpipe repainting, the cell providers are reinstalling equipment and, again, coordinating payment with the IEPA. The 2019 roadway referendum and the resurfacing program, those are two different, the money comes from two different sources. The work's been completed, and they're working on the parkway restoration that's going to happen in the spring. Basically, it's just sodding the parkways. The IEPA loan for the Clausen Avenue water main replacement is completed. The Central Avenue sewer separation, right now, it's just coordinating easements with both the tollway and the park district. And finally, the West Suburban mass transit, like the electrical charging station kind of by Starbucks, we finally received approval from the BNSF, and we're just waiting on the weather. And so hopefully that's going to be a quick project that will be done in 4 or 5 weeks, as soon as it starts.
Can I just ask one question about the Lakeshore contract? So you said the street sweeping and disposal. What is the disposal part of that contract? Is that for village?
Probably just organized,
Probably
they had
just
streets.
disposal of
What they
the,
sweep.
Oh,
stuff that
just
you
disposal
Yes.
of the stuff they clean off
Yeah.
the street? Okay.
So basically, they're planning on coming once a month to
Oh, to do street
street
cleaning.
cleaning,
They've
which
been
is what
doing-
they've always done.
That's what they've been
It's
doing.
no
That is our street
substantive
sweeping.
change.
Yeah.
I was like, are they disposing something? But just
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Just the crud from the streets.
we've been using Lakeshore for that
Yeah.
for several years.
Correct,
And
yes.
it's just one of those
Yeah.
annual contract
Yeah.
renewals, which I see it's that time of year to
Yeah.
renew all our annual contracts, so they're just one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering if they were providing something else, but just street sweeping. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And that's all I have.
Great, thank you, trustee Fink.
Can I ask you?
Oh, of course.
Same question regarding the contracts. Are they all within the expected
Yes.
budget? Okay. And then with respect to the well being 4 weeks behind schedule, will those 4 weeks be caught up at any point, or is it definitely then delaying the whole project by 4 weeks?
Yeah, I think you might be, but I think
Yeah,
it's
so
just-
we've had
it's
some
gonna be
preliminary
delayed.
conversations on that. We won't really know until we have an opportunity to actually sit down and do a pre-construction meeting with the contractor. If there's opportunity based on lead times for material and some of the construction schedule, we may be able to. But we're not allowed to actually meet with the contractor until we get that notice to proceed from the IEPA. So we can't even sit down with them yet to have those discussions. So right now, there's a set working days that the project's been established through the IEPA process, and that's where that kind of 4-week delay is sitting right now, since the whole project has basically shifted.
Okay.
But if we do have construction opportunities, once we get to work, we will try to take those opportunities to move the project forward if we can.
Okay.
Do we know why they're backed up 4 weeks?
No, I mean, it's the IEPA processing their various projects. It's part of their revolving loan program, so they have a large volume of projects throughout the entire state that get processed through the system.
And we are dependent on them. We cannot continue unless we get that letter. So if we had the money outright, we could do it. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Planning and Zoning Committee, trustee Jen.
Thank you very much.
Yes?
Sorry.
So this evening, we want to discuss some amendments and supporting some federal bills with regard to 5G. And so starting with resolution calling for an amendment of the Illinois Small Cell Deployment Act to return control of local right-of-ways to local municipalities, or in the alternative, to repeal the act. So many of the individuals here are very familiar with this act and the fact that it has taken away much of the abilities of municipalities such as Western Springs to control the right-of-ways, and the goal here is to amend it. And I think Attorney Jurusik, would you like to speak to this a little bit about the scope of it? But in general, it is just our ask to gain control back from the state of Illinois and be able to take more control.
That is correct. It's based on a resolution that Burr Ridge adopted a couple of years ago. We have taken that language and, adopted most of what they have put in there. Burr Ridge's ordinance was focused on a proposed act, the proposed Small Cell Act. That act's already with us, so that, that's some of the differences between our resolution and Burr Ridge's. We also took the extra step of doing a second resolution to support the two pieces of federal legislation adopted by, or at least submitted in the House and the Senate out in Washington to restore local control in 5G broadband deployment. There's two particular acts that are pieces of legislation that are pending out there. So one resolution deals with our state deployment act. The other one supports two federal bills. They're both up for action later tonight. The other thing I just wanted to let everybody know that at the end of last week, a state piece of legislation was submitted by Representative Deanne Mazzocchi, excuse me. It's House Bill 4653. It's just briefly, it creates the Local Control Protection and Empowering Law. It amends the Small Wireless Facilities Deployment Act. And what it does is it allows property owners who file a petition to require a public hearing by a municipality prior to the municipality approving or denying an installation if the installation is located in an area zoned exclusively for residential purposes. So it's a piece of legislation just filed. It's not law. It hasn't been approved. It hasn't gone through the process yet. But we will make sure that this gets up on the village's website tomorrow, so everybody can see, what it says. Those are my comments.
Yeah,
if anybody has questions, let me know.
As far as the resolutions that we'll be introducing later on in omnibus, that is just our support, our behind these proposals, the federal proposal and the House proposal. We're just standing behind that, saying this is our voice. Hear it.
Yes, this is this board's collective, stance on those two issues, and if approved, then it would get executed. They would get executed, and then we'll send them both off to both Washington and to Springfield.
Okay.
And they will be posted on the village's website as well.
I have
Okay.
a question. I'm sorry. So is it too early to send any support to Representative Mazzocchi on this proposed legislation, or is it something that can wait, or individually can we or any of our residents?
Well, it just
lend
came out on
support?
Friday. I would say you need to digest it. But the reality is we could come back at a later date after looking at it and certainly support it. Let the public weigh in on it. That would be my suggestion. It hasn't even, I don't know that it's even been assigned to committee yet, but it certainly is something that,
So I think that's what Trustee Sifferman is alluding to, the process, and so it has to be assigned to committee before we could fill out a witness slip or anything like that.
Correct.
Right.
But
Yeah,
that-
I would run it through, planning and zoning, look at the legislation, and bring it back at the next board meeting.
Well, I'm really speaking on behalf of individuals that at some point they would want to weigh in, not necessarily solely, I'm not speaking about what our action as a board would be, which, that will follow the regular process. But in terms of any individual support of this, perhaps this is something that our residents would be able to find interesting information for them to utilize if they choose to do so.
I would agree, and that's why posting it, tomorrow so the residents are aware of it. And then they would be able to reach out, through the, legislative support process, their representatives, and, voice their support, concerns, whatever.
Practically speaking, though, do they have to wait till it's assigned to a committee, or if they just start?
No, they can certainly reach out to Misaki directly right now, through, her office.
Maybe then again, once it's in the committee, they can reaffirm, the citizens can reaffirm how they feel about this bill.
Correct.
Through the witness slips.
Witness,
or-
okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's, they'll accept emails, they'll accept letters, they will take, their constituents' comments any way they come.
How quickly does the state work on this?
I
Like,
can't
is this
answer
gonna-
that.
Is this going to take, is this a 4-month process, or is it?
Well, they're in session.
I can't, they're in session right now, so, bills like this will get, submitted and then sent to committee, but there's no, set time frame that moves things along. Things can get buried in committee, things can move very quickly out of committee. It just depends on who's behind it and, what the appetite is for passing a legislative, measure.
It starts with the committee, though, right? The
Correct.
committee is the first step. and
Is
it's
the first
Is
step.
the key part to focus on at the beginning.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Can I, on these resolutions, so just to be clear.
Yep.
The one is supporting the currently introduced, or I guess you could call them pending, but bills in the House and the Senate. So that's
The two
supporting.
pieces of federal
those two
legislation.
Those, right,
Yes.
okay. The other resolution is not supporting anything because it's not there yet. The resolution calls for an amendment to the current act, right? So I just
Or
want-
its repeal, because
Or its repeal.
in our findings, we find that it's taken away too much control from the
Right.
local municipalities.
Right, but I just want to be clear
Correct.
that there is not anything currently pending. We're calling for there to be
Correct.
that amendment or the.
Correct.
or
And,
the
and we
repeal.
are, our firm is actually drafting some proposed amendments to that small cell, Illinois Small Cell Act that we'll be sharing with our clients, you included. And, we've already reached out to legislators and, are hopeful that, it can gain some traction, down in Springfield.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, just to passing a resolution that's like non-binding, but it is, the point of passing a resolution like this is to,
Is to let the legislators hear
Oh.
from everybody, from all different prongs, all different aspects.
Okay.
Residents, interest groups,
well, I mean, this
institutions.
resolution's where we say the president and the board are saying this, so
Correct.
it's. Okay.
You're speaking for the community as
Okay.
elected officials.
Okay. I see. And these did not go through committee, they were drafted?
No, we were, sort of asked to move this on a faster timeline than that.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, so appreciate Attorney Drusik putting this together, again, even up until the last minute. So from a posting perspective, it was some heavy lifting for him and his team to put this together in such a way that gets it to the point where, it really, I think, is in alignment with much of what individuals in the audience and around the village ask for is trying to get that local control back, and whether or not it's going against the Illinois laws as well as supporting the HR 530 and S 2012 to again get that control back. So again, please reach out to your lawmakers and such to support the two federal bills, because that's, we're just one group here, individuals out in the audience in Western Springs can certainly reach out to the lawmakers and ask for their support, which, it takes a village, it takes more than a village to get some things like these, this done. So, thank you, Attorney Drusik, for putting these together.
It's going to take a lot of villages.
Yes, it's going to take a lot of villages, right? Yes.
Well, on that point, are there other villages that are proposing these type of resolutions that we know about in addition to Burr Ridge?
Yeah, our versions are being circulated among our clients that are interested. So, and I'm sure once it's posted on the website, other, interested parties will share it, and it'll make its rounds, throughout the Metro Chicago area and downstate.
But to your point, trustee Chen, we did skip the usual process of going through committee first because we asked Attorney Jerusik to fast track this, like we've asked him to fast track so much related to 5G in response to our residents' concerns, so.
Right, if we would have, that would have waited, 2 weeks or another month for,
Right.
to go through the normal processes
Committee
and,
meeting, yeah.
So
here in
this
the-
is our opportunity now to
Yeah,
discuss it.
okay, so we're discussing
Yes.
it now. Okay.
And so again, to that point, then it's on the agenda to vote as an omnibus tonight, as opposed to including it in the normal omnibus at the fourth meeting?
That is correct.
But if the board decides that they want to delay that vote, we can, so. We don't have to vote on them tonight.
I don't see any reason why we would delay that. Is there-
Yeah.
I mean,
Right,
We've seen them, we've reviewed them.
Right.
right.
Well, I would think the only reason to delay it is if people want to read it.
We can read it.
We
We
can
will read it into the record right now.
Okay?
In my opinion, too, between the two, they're pretty different. I think the one that supports the pending federal legislation, to me, is very clear. We know what the wording is in those. So to me, it's quite a bit different than the one that's calling for an amendment. And I'm sorry, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but those are really kind of different types of resolutions. And I think different in their tone and intent. So, yeah, let's read
Okay.
these.
Trustee John,
Okay.
would you like to read them into
Sure.
the record?
So starting with a resolution calling for an amendment of the Illinois Small Cell Deployment Act to return control of local rights of ways to local municipalities, or in the alternative, repeal of the act. Whereas the Village of Western Springs, the Village, in Illinois, an Illinois non-home rule municipality, supports the goal of ensuring reliable cellular coverage throughout our communities and technology enhancements such as smart technology and 5G wireless communication, as long as the local impacts of such technology are not detrimental to the aesthetics of the Village of Western Spring, or undermine the village's use of right-of-way, or impact the number of trees in the parkway areas, or reduce the tree canopy areas, or present the potential negative impacts on health, welfare, and safety of village residents, property owners, businesses, and the public. And whereas Public Act 100-585, known as the Illinois Small Cell Wireless Facilities Deployment Act, 50 ILCS 840/1 et sequester Act, acts to impose certain limitations, restrictions, and additional requirements on municipalities, including the village, regarding the permitting, construction, deployment, regulation, operation, maintenance, repair, and removal of certain defined small wireless facilities, both within public rights-of-way and in other locations within the jurisdiction of the village. And whereas the act permits a private business entity to take and use public property without reasonable regulation or fair compensation, amounting to an illegal taking that is unprecedented use of public property with no basis in law. And whereas the act allows cellular carriers and wireless providers without oversight to locate equipment where it may potentially interfere with crucial municipality systems used by police, firefighting, water, and other critical local operations, and without enhanced local regulations, there will be a negative impacts on the number of trees in parkway areas and reductions in the tree canopy areas. Further, the act's failure to mandate co-location of equipment on existing utility poles and light poles in the right-of-way, public rights-of-way, will lead to an unanticipated proliferation of new poles within the public rights-of-way that will have an extremely detrimental impact on aesthetics within residential areas of the village and may cause property values to decline. And whereas the act fails to provide municipalities with adequate recourse to address unsafe installations or dangerous equipment. And whereas the act creates an automatic approval timeline which is one-sided and detrimental to the public, presuming that municipalities are negligent and providers are not when a permit is incomplete or inadequate, and whereas the act provides unfettered and supervised access to commercial entities that have only their own profitability as their guide, going against critical public interest to ensure that wireless facilities are installed and maintained in a way that safeguards the public's connection to the wireless world in an era of heightened awareness of cybersecurity risks, and it's going a little longer still. It is the responsibility of local authorities to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of its citizens, and the act undermines the responsibility, and whereas it is vital that local authorities be able to hold for-profit commercial entities to an appropriate standard of responsibility for their use of public asset, and whereas Illinois municipalities are diverse and each one must be given a chance to develop reasonable regulations that will protect their community's specific needs, and whereas the President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Western Springs make the following findings and statements. The President and the Board of Trustees oppose the act and encourage the Illinois Legislature and Governor to amend the act to return control to the local rights-of-ways to local municipalities, or, in the alternative, to repeal the act. And the President and Board of Trustees encourages the telecommunications industries to look to alternative methods of deploying small cell or small wireless facilities in a manner that better protects the rights of local governments and their own infrastructure and the public property. And the President and the Board of Trustees are committed to developing reasonable regulations for the development of wireless technology and is eager to work with all interested parties and stakeholders to develop regulations that ensure reliable cellular coverage while preventing the unfettered taking and use of public property by private business concerns. Be it further resolved by the President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Western Springs, Cook County, Illinois, as follows. Section 1, each whereas paragraph above is incorporated by reference into this Section 1 and made a part hereof as material and operative provisions of this resolution. Section 2, the President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Western Springs find that it is in the best interests of the Village of Western Springs and its residents, properties owners, businesses, and the public to express its opposition to the act as approved, to urge its amendment or repeal, and work with all interested properties and stakeholders to develop regulations that ensure reliable cellular coverage while preventing the unfettered taking of the use of public property by private business concerns. Section 3, the resolution shall be in full force and effect from and after its adoption, approval, and publication in a manner provided by law. Passed by, okay, don't need the last one. All right. And so that is the first one. Give me some more water. All right.
You good?
Yep. So a resolution supporting federal bills HR 530 and S 2012 to restore local control in 5G broadband deployment. Whereas the Village of Western Springs, the Village, an Illinois non-home rule municipality, supports the goal of ensuring reliable cellular coverage throughout our communities and technology enhancements such as smart technology and 5G wireless communications, as long as the local impacts of such technology are not detrimental to the aesthetics of the village or undermine the village's use of its rights-of-way or impact the number of trees in parkway areas to reduce the tree canopy areas or present the potential for negative impacts on health, welfare, and safety of village residents, property owners, businesses, and the public. And whereas the Federal Communications Commission on September 26, 2018 adopted a declaratory ruling and third report and order in the matter of accelerating wireless broadband deployment by removing barriers to infrastructure investment and accelerating wireline broadband deployment by removing barriers to infrastructure investment. The FCC declaratory ruling. One moment.
Okay.
Whereas the FCC declaratory ruling favors wireless providers by specifically limiting the ability of local governments to negotiate or regulate in the public interest in key areas regarding small wireless facility deployment. Such limitations include, but are not limited to, the imposition of shot clocks, restriction on fees, and the imposition on limitations on local governments to act in a proprietary capacity in controlling their own infrastructure. And whereas the FCC declaratory ruling provides unfettered and unsupervised access to commercial entities that have only their own profitability as their guide, going against critical public's interest to ensure that wireless facilities are installed and maintained in a way that safeguards the public's connection to the wireless world in an era of heightened awareness and cybersecurity risks. And whereas it is the responsibility of local authorities to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of its citizens, and the FCC declaratory ruling undermines this responsibility. And whereas it is vital that local authorities be able to hold for-profit commercial entities to an appropriate standard of responsibility for their use of public asset and infrastructure. And whereas on January 14th, 2019, Representative Anna Eshoo, Democrat from California, introduced H.R. 530, Accelerating Broadband Deployment by Empowering Local Communities Act of 2019, which would nullify rules issued by the Federal Communications Commissions that revoke state and local authority to regulate telecommunications equipment deployment. And whereas on June 27, 2019, Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California, introduced a companion bill to H.R. 530 in the Senate, S2012, Restoring Local Control Order over Public Infrastructure Act of 2019, which would help restore local control in the 5G broadband deployment. And whereas the President and the Board of Trustees of the Village of Western Springs make the following findings and statements. The President and the Board of Trustees support H.R. 530, Accelerating Broadband Development by Empowering Local Communities Act of 2019, and S2012, Restoring Local Control over Public Infrastructure Act of 2019, which would help restore local control in 5G broadband deployment. And the President and Board of Trustees encourages its residents, property owners, businesses, and public and state and federal, encourages its residents, property owners, businesses, and the public and state and federal representatives to support the proposed legislation and other similar efforts to return control of local right-of-way to municipalities. And the President and the Board of Trustees are committed to developing reasonable regulations for the deployment of wireless technology and is eager to work with all interested parties and stakeholders to develop regulations that ensure reliable cellular coverage while preventing the unfettered taking and use of public property by private business concerns. Be it further resolved by the President and Board of Trustees of the Village of Western Springs, Cook County, Illinois, as follows. Section 1. Each whereas paragraph above is incorporated by reference into this Section 1 and made part hereof as material and operative provisions of this resolution. Section 2, the President and the Board of Trustees of the Village of Western Springs find that it is in the best interest of the Village of Western Springs and its residents, property owners, businesses, and the public to support H.R. 530, Accelerating Broadband Development by Empowering Local Communities Act of 2019, and S2012, Restoring Local Control over Public Infrastructure Act of 2019, to continue to work with all interested parties and stakeholders to develop regulations that ensures reliable cellular coverage while preventing the unfettered taking and use of the public property by private business concerns. Section 3. This resolution shall be in full force in effect from and after its adoption, approval, and publication in the manner provided by law.
Thank you very much, Trustee John.
You're welcome.
Is there any discussion? Would anyone like to discuss these two resolutions? They're pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, they're pretty mouthful. I mean, yeah.
And I think they capture our desire to take back local control that's been taken away from us by the federal and state legislation, so.
I'm
and
prepared to
regulation.
support action on that this evening.
Thank you. Can we do a quick consensus on that to see whether it should stay on the agenda as an action item?
I'm supportive of staying.
Okay.
As am I.
Trustee Ruda?
I'm supportive of supporting the federal bills because again, they're already written and it's pretty clear what we're supporting. And I think both are really thorough. I'm just trying to go through in my head all of the kind of the concerns and correspondence that we have had from our residents. I appreciate Mr. Holderman having mentioned the Burr Ridge resolution a couple of times. It helped to bring certain things to my attention and helps me balance this one. So I'm just trying to think through all of those. It's very comprehensive. I think it does address the concerns. I'm really supportive of the idea. I guess if it were up to me, I would rather wait on the Illinois amendment just to have a little bit more time to look at the language. So I would be in favor of moving forward with the federal ones to support those and delaying the other to the next meeting on that omnibus, would be my opinion.
Okay. Trustee Fink?
I think I could support it now, but I totally get your point, and if we delay it, it gives people time to give their input. I'm up for that as well.
I interpret this as calling for the amendment, and I think
Right.
time is of the essence. And so that's why I would support action this evening.
Are we prohibited from, if we put this through and we come forth and say, this is where we stand right now, and 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, whatever it might be, other issues come, are we prohibited from amending this or an additional resolution?
Not at all. You know, you don't tie your hands at all. It's a policy statement as of today, based on the collective board's opinion today. And whatever your opinion is a month or 6 months from now, you can do the same type of proclamation and state what your opinion, is at that time.
It might be helpful to have this on the books, on the omnibus tonight, before the town hall meeting on Thursday, so at least we're somewhat unified in the way we feel about it with, I assume there'll be other municipalities there, I don't know.
Yeah, I know Clarendon Hills president has RSVP'd that he's coming. Not sure if we've received other municipal responses.
Yes, we do have other municipalities participating.
Okay. So, yeah, that's a good point.
I'd like to be able to show them, this is what we're doing now. We're going to revisit it if we find other things out there. And we certainly are, as you said, we can offer as many resolutions as we see fit.
Good point. Trustee Chen?
So that was my question as well, Trustee Terrell. If we put this out there now, can we amend it or can we put out another resolution in the future? But I think these reflect my concerns that I've had all along since we've been monitoring this process. So I'm in support of moving forward tonight with the knowledge that we might perhaps make a change in the future.
Okay. Trustee Rudolph?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Just the process in the event that we would want to amend or add another one, what would be the process?
We would go through committee the next time.
Okay.
This was somewhat of an expedited
Right.
process because of the importance, but I would anticipate you're going to see a draft code amendment. You're going to see some draft legislation that we are, putting together for, amendments to the state act.
Okay.
That'll go through committee. Here in this next probably, 30 days, I would anticipate. And, so those can come back to the board for, action and, the amendments to the state law, if there's a consensus, then, that would be, talked about here, as a consensus to support pushing that out to, the state, representatives. Staff is not going to push proposed legislation, without running it through committee, without getting consensus of the board and having, the board weigh in on that, because ultimately it's your policy statement, not staff or my policy statement.
Okay, so we'll keep these two resolutions on the omnibus for vote tonight. Trustee Jen, are you all worn out? Do you
I think
have
I am.
anything else to say?
Do you want to read anything else?
Sure.
I have a magazine here.
Encyclopedia Britannica.
That's right.
Sure. No, I'm all set. Thank you, President Gallagher.
Thank you, Trustee Jen. Moving on to the Finance Committee, Trustee Rudolph.
Yes, I'm going to introduce our Jeff Ziegler to talk to us a little bit about timber trails.
Oh. Here we go.
Good evening, President Gallagher and Board of Trustees. Tonight, we're going to have just a brief discussion to bring all of the trustees and President Gallagher up to speed on the Timber Trails development. There is a process through which a group is called BOLI, and we'll get into that a little bit further, that needs to process payments on behalf of this Timber Trails development. And so tonight, my intent is to give the board a discussion or talk about with the board, the discussion about the property itself, a little bit of history, the improvements and where the improvements stand, and then also to give you some insight on the financing for the development. And I'll start with the property. In 2004, Dartmoor Homes was a successful bidder at the auction for 106 acres of the Timber Trails Golf Course and a separate pool facility that actually existed on the property just off to the east of the clubhouse that sat on the property. The bid was for $47 million. $45 million for the golf course and another $2 million that was purchased to purchase the actual pool. It was a club, private club, on the property. The property north and south boundaries are the Ridgewood subdivision on the north end. That's at the top of the screen. I'll let you check on that, Marty. At the top of the screen, and Plainfield Road at the south end of the, thank you. On the south end, down in this area, down here, that's Plainfield Road. We have Wolf Road on the east side, and then we've got the 294 and the Flag Creek area along the west side. After going through a lengthy zoning process, the village annexed the property on March 22nd, 2005. Under the terms of the annexation agreement that also governed, under the terms of an annexation agreement that also governed the development of the site. The zoning approvals granted by the developer, granted to the developer the right to construct a mix of single-family homes and townhomes. There were 338 residential dwelling units proposed total on the project as part of a planned unit development. In the midst of the 2008 economic downturn, the development fell into foreclosure and ultimately became an asset of PNC Bank. To protect itself, the village called the developer's letter of credit and received about $3.484 million in June of 2009, which funds were posted to ensure the completion of the public improvements, which included the streets, sidewalks, streetlights, and stormwater facilities. In 2012, using limited liability companies, a company called Medley Capital, a business development company, acquired the property and special assessment bonds from PNC Bank for an undisclosed amount. Medley Capital then hired Timber Trails Development Company to complete the development and provided financing for the developer to complete development. The improvements, it's the second category. The improvements of the planned unit development applied across all 106 acres and consisted of 338 dwelling units, as I spoke before, broken down to 234 single-family homes and 104 townhomes. The townhomes are located off of Plainfield and Wolf in this area, and the townhomes are also all along Flag Creek in this area back inside here. The balance of the subdivision, single-family residential. In addition to the homes that are on the property, the 106 acres, there are tree conservation areas and a 5-acre park that was dedicated to the Park District. That 5-acre park is right up in this corner right here. The development was designed to preserve trees in the rear yard open space behind the majority of the homes. This is also where the pedestrian walkways are located. Difficult to see, but on the drawing, open spaces behind the homes the gray lines are the roadway. The green open spaces are in the rears of the homes. And these open spaces also contain all the walking paths within the subdivision. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The homes that don't have walking path behind them, for instance, the homes that are along the Ridgewood subdivision, have sidewalks in front of them. So that there's some continuity in the path system and the sidewalk system for the public in that particular area. The potable water and sanitary sewer services are owned and maintained by the LaGrange Highlands Sanitary District. As the site was located within the sanitary district's tax jurisdiction and their planning area. The Village of Western Springs does not serve the sanitary sewer service and the water service in this particular area. Once the public improvements are accepted by the village will own and maintain the concrete roadways, the storm sewer drainage system, and the ornamental street lighting system. The open green spaces within the development are owned by the village and maintained by the Timber Trails Homeowners Association. The detention basins, of which there are 3 large detention basins that there's one inside here, which is a wet basin. There's one down in this corner in here, adjacent to Plainfield Road, and there's a very large one on the west side of the creek. There's also a very small one up in this corner that's part of the Park District property. The detention basins are owned and maintained by the Homeowners Association. As required by the annexation agreement, the village created a special service area to ensure that any future maintenance and replacement of the storm sewer drainage system and the detention basins will be paid for by the property owners within the development and not the village. The project was separated into 2 phases, Phase 1 and Phase 2, by the developer for construction purposes. The phase line is essentially, this is what's called the boulevard in this particular area. It's got a rotary right in the center here. That's basically where the phase line occurs. This area to the east is all of Phase 1, and then all of Phase 2 is the balance of the area on the west side of the boulevard. All of the Phase 1 public improvements, including improvements to Wolf Road, there were off-site improvements that were required to Wolf Road in this particular area, and to Plainfield Roads are completed, and 90% of the Phase 2 improvements are completed. The remaining work in Phase 2 consists of the 2 cul-de-sacs, so it's this small area down inside here, and there are 2 cul-de-sacs back inside here, and that area is the remaining portion of the development of public improvements that remain incomplete to this date. Remaining work in Phase 2 consists of the 2 cul-de-sacs, their associated storm and sanitary sewer, the water main, and the path system. Into the financing. In order to encourage the annexation, the village, prior to the auction sale of the property, the village offered all bidders certain zoning and development rights and the opportunity to finance the public improvement cost and the acquisition cost of land to be dedicated for open space, and the public land with special public open space public land with special assessment bonds. The village issued $55 million in special assessments bonds for the benefit of the developer and the development in cooperation with the bonding authority, with the Park District and the LaGrange Highlands Sanitary District. The special assessment bonds were available at lower interest rate than commercially available financing. The bond issuance carried no risk to the village because the developer is solely responsible to pay the special assessment bonds, and there is a special assessment lien filed against each lot within the subdivision. If the developer were to default on the bonds, then the unsold lots would be placed up for auction and sold to pay off the bonds. At some point, Medley Capital sold the special assessment bonds to an entity controlled by the developer. The village board members are also the Board of Local Improvements, what we refer to as BOLI. The BOLI meets in public meetings held immediately before the village board meetings to review the completion of the public improvements as documented by the village engineer and approve the release of the bond funds and the developer's letter of credit funds to the developer to pay for authorized expenditures related to the completed public improvements, known as draws. Since 2006, the Board of Local Improvements has processed 84 such draws. And I'll open it up to questions.
Well, thank you very much for that summary. It was quite a history, and there was, some information that I was not aware of, so appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions of it? Engineer Ziegler?
So 84 draws have been made. So, and how many, I mean, is that all related to the $55 million?
That is correct. The 84 draws are specifically related to the $55 million. And a substantial portion of the first draw, I think the first draw was roughly 34 million? Yes. Yeah, about 34 million.
Okay.
It paid for the public land and things like that. And then also some infrastructure improvements. There were also a host of other their financing terms and stuff like that that were all included as part of that $34 million initially.
So I guess my question is, how much is left to be drawn? And is
So-
that what's related to the last two cul-de-sacs?
Right. The
Okay.
village is holding about $1.4 million right currently. And there are probably about $300,000 to $400,000 worth of improvements that are left to be completed. So we have plenty of money. That money also will serve as the money to assist the developer in making sure that all the improvements, when the village elects to take over those improvements, are up to the village's standard.
Okay.
So any type of maintenance work that needed to be done, if there are areas of roadways or anything like that that need to be replaced, the additional $1 million basically that we're holding will be part of that to assist the developer in completing that.
And apologies if I'm not getting this right, but the repayment of those bonds is made by the developer?
That is correct. Each time the
Okay.
developer sells a lot and sells a home,
Yeah.
as part of their closing, they actually pay the bonds off,
Okay.
essentially.
So that's when they get repaid, is when a property sells. There.
Yes.
I'll turn it over to the rest of the trustees.
Jeff, you'll have to forgive me, I haven't been out there in a while. How many of these homes are built? Are we all, I mean, how close are they to finishing this?
In phase one, I would say we're probably nearing the 90% range. In phase two, I'd say we're probably at, the townhomes are substantially built out currently. There's a few under construction on the south end. But I'd say we're probably at the maybe 45% of the single families and townhomes in phase two.
So the BOLI will be in operation for quite some time.
Yes, the BOLI will be in operation as long as the developer continues to need to improve or do public improvements. And we don't know what the current status of this area is. He has large stockpiles of topsoil and things like that out inside there. They use it for the construction area to develop properties, to try and consolidate where their contractors are storing materials and stuff like that to keep the subdivision clean right now. So my guess is within 5 years, BOLI will probably be done with its process.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you. No further update.
Thank you, Trustee Rudolph. Moving on to Trustee Sifferman with Public Health and Safety Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I have two public health and safety operations to report on this evening that came out of our Public Health and Safety Committee meeting last week. And the material is in your binders. First is an annual operation hosted by the police department entitled Buckle Up Your Valentine. This usually comes in February, and it focuses on the efforts of the police department to promote proper installation of car seats and booster seats for our young children, and an opportunity to educate parents and caregivers, and particularly grandparents whose car seats when we were kids were the front armrest. This is open to residents and non-residents on Saturday, February 22nd from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Officers Hull, Magnuson, and School Resource Officer Nezgoda, who are certified car seat technicians, will be on hand to educate those who appear and the proper installation of these car seats that save lives and make sure your Valentines are secure for another year. The next item I'd like to mention is the efforts on the part of the fire department. Chief Kenny has announced the emergency disaster tabletop drill that will occur on January 20th. Now, this is an opportunity for the fire department and the police department to coordinate their efforts that interact with other city departments and agencies in the event of a disaster or another emergency, and improve the competencies of these bodies to interact with each other, and village personnel that will be on site to go through this exercise that will occur beginning around 8 o'clock, where everybody will muster in the emergency center in the concourse level of this building and exercise this tabletop drill, and then debrief at the end of that session closer to noon. So as trustees, we're all invited to participate in this. I know that there may be a requirement for us to have completed the other emergency exercise in order to qualify for that, but we're all invited and encouraged to take part in this.
Trustee Sifferman, can you confirm the dates of that again?
That is January the 30th.
February?
I said the 20th, I
No,
believe.
but no,
February.
January,
February.
February. February. Our
February
memo
20th.
says January.
February.
It's February
20th.
February 20th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much, Trustee Sifferman. Moving on to the General Government Committee, Trustee Tiro.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We heard from Trustee Chen regarding the West BNSF Prospect Avenue underpass. Trustee Chen discussed the contract with BNSF and also with the engineers. I have a third matter for your consideration. Will hopefully be on the omnibus in 2 weeks, and that regards an intergovernmental government agreement between the board and the local public agencies to enable a federal participation. IDOT requires all municipalities utilizing federal funding to approve a local agency agreement and resolution. We're moving forward on the West Underpass construction at Prospect. It's essentially connecting, as we all know, the pool area with Spring Rock Park. Federal funding will pay for 75% of the construction costs, which are quite large. I think they're in excess of $3 million. Federal contribution to be about 2.2 to 2.4 million. The village will fund the remaining 25%, but of that, we are receiving grants from Metra, Invest in Cook, and the Illinois Commerce Commission. Preliminarily, Metra is, I think, giving us about $200,000. Invest in Cook is $200,000, and then the Illinois Commerce Commission is $900,000. These are just estimates. In order to channel all this money, we do need a local agency agreement and a resolution to establish, to set up these funds. It's an intergovernmental agreement. We must do it as soon as possible because we're hoping to get the bid letting out by April of 2020. So we must have this in place before that. So again, it'll be on the omnibus in 2 weeks. Anyone had any questions about that? Okay. My second item is a resolution to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. And Janine, would you like to address us about this very important and very timely now historical matter?
Yes, well, I'm here with Lisa Dunbaston, and we, of course, are both the residents of Western Springs. And I just wanted to tell you that the League of Women Voters was started by the original suffragettes. In fact, they were the more moderate group of the original suffragettes. There were, until I read the book, The Woman's Hour, The Fight for the Vote, all 410 pages of it, I didn't realize that there were all these little splinter groups, often at odds with one another, working to pass the 19th Amendment. But anyway, when it looked like they'd get all 30, at that time they needed 36 states to ratify the 19th Amendment, this group of suffragettes got together and said, well, we have to do something to educate women so that once they get the vote, they know what they're doing. And that's how the League of Women Voters was established. Here in Chicago, at the, I think at that time it was called the Pick Congress Hotel. And since then they've met, you know, to celebrate the 50th anniversary, the 70th anniversary, and they'll be back meeting again on Friday to celebrate the centennial of the start of the League of Women Voters. And the Western Springs League was started approximately the same time the League of Women Voters of Illinois was started in 1924. And so it was one of the very early local leagues within Illinois. So it's had an interesting history. It was the League of Women Voters of Western Springs and Hinsdale between 1940 and 1950. And then they separated and became their own leagues. And then in 1995, it became, women started going back to work. There weren't as many women to go to daytime meetings, even though they adjusted and started having nighttime meetings and Saturday meetings. There was just a change in women, in the women's role. And so we merged with the LaGrange Area League. And now the LaGrange Area League encompasses not only Western Springs and LaGrange Park and the Highlands and Countryside and Brookfield, and there's still about 20 members here in Western Springs, but I'm the oldest one. I have been a member of the league for over 50 years, and so yes, it's very near and dear to my heart. So I volunteered to come and ask the board to pass this proclamation.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm glad you did, because I noticed our Western Springs neighbors this weekend. I talked quite a bit about the League of Women Voters. It's just one of the many interests you have, and you have been our clerk for over 30 years. You were a trustee prior to that, and you know, this is an opportunity to commend you on all your service, all the civic service that you've done. It's been wonderful for Western Springs and for our community, our region at large. And so thank you very much, Janine.
Instrumental in getting me here too.
And Lisa is a former trustee.
Yes,
So.
yes. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to read that into the record. It will be on omnibus in just a few minutes, but I am honored to read this into the record, Janine, on behalf of yourself and your community, for all the things your community and your league has done for 100 years. I think in today's political climate, this could not be more appropriate to go over this. So, unless Trustee John would like to read this, I will take this. This is a resolution to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. Whereas, on February 14th, 1920, the League of Women Voters, the League, was formed at the Congress Hotel in Chicago, Illinois. Whereas the League was formed 6 months prior to, but in anticipation of, ratification of the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote in the United States. Whereas the League was a political experiment designed to help 20 million women carry out their new responsibilities as voters by educating them about issues. Whereas from the beginning, the League determined that it would be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing any political party or individual candidate. Whereas the League continues today as a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Whereas today the League is composed of members in over 700 local, county, and state leagues in all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, the Virgin Islands, and Hong Kong. Whereas among those states' leagues is the League of Women Voters of Illinois, which was incorporated on March 22nd, 1920, and is in turn composed of over 40 local leagues with almost 4,000 members. Whereas among those local leagues is the Illinois League of Women Voters of the LaGrange area, which was incorporated as the League of Women Voters of LaGrange in 1924 and is in turn composed of more than 100 members. Whereas the members of the League first study and then take action on a broad range of issues after reaching consensus on positions. Whereas leagues at all levels, among other activities, register voters, educate voters by holding candidate forums and publishing voter guides, publish public policy research, and hold meetings on key issues. Whereas the League is a civic organization that has fought since 1920 to improve government and engage everyone in the decisions that impact their lives. Whereas the League celebrates its 100th anniversary on February 14th, 2020. Now, therefore, the Village of Western Springs declares February 14th, 2020 as a date to celebrate the League of Women Voters and its vision of democracy, where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate.
Thank you.
Again, I'll be putting that on the omnibus in a few minutes. Moving on, and again, thank you, Janine, for coming and educating us about this. The next matter I have is an ordinance amending the Western Springs Municipal Code Title IV, that's Liquor Control, Chapter 1, Alcoholic Liquor, relative to adding specialty drinks under Class J, that's special events only on village-owned property, liquor licenses, and Class M, theater license. There's also, I have an ordinance amending Title IV, Liquor Control, Chapter 1, Alcoholic Liquor, Section 4-1-10A13 of the Western Springs Village Code relative to the creation of a Class M, that's theater license, beer, wine, and specialty drinks only liquor license, issued to the Theater of Western Springs for the property located at 4384 Hampton, Western Springs. This will be on the omnibus in 2 weeks, and what this is if you remember, I was back here in December, and Nicole Chen and I had discussed this in front of you. We have an amendment to the liquor code regarding the Theater of Western Springs. They want a Class M liquor license that was created earlier to allow the theater to sell beer and wine at their events. In addition to beer and wine, the theater is seeking to expand alcohol sales to include liquor in the form of theme-based drinks based on their performances. It's not going to be a bar. They're only going to have one specific drink per the play or the musical or whatever it might be, a theme drink. The way it works, they are going to have professional service, bar service being there. I think it was, you could buy 2 drinks and you could bring them in to the play or performance and consume them during the event rather than sitting at the front and drinking it. Again, these are specialty drinks. They're going to be quite creative. They're to be enjoyed during the performance, no bar seating. You buy the drink, you bring it into the show with a limit of 2 drinks. Now, we're also amending our ordinance, special events in the village-owned property to include these specialty drinks as well. Our village events that we have beer and wine, but if it's good for the village, or good for the theater, we're going to do it in the village as well. We'll also have, I believe, theme drinks depending on the event that's happening. I don't know if that'd be a certain kind of Halloween cider that's spiked or something of that nature, but we are seeking to amend our ordinance to, just like the theater, to allow one specialty drink per designation. So that'll be on omnibus.
Trustee Terrell, I have a question about that.
Yes.
Will this allow the venue to charge or serve these at any of the events that they have for adults? Or is this for a special date that's been defined? This will be, allow them this, a license to do this at any time?
You mean the theater
The
or
theater.
the village?
The theater.
Was my understanding was just if they had an adult play, obviously not something for children, that anytime they had an adult play or performance, they would, with this ordinance, be able to come up with one drink, just one, 2-drink minimum. But that would be, is my understanding, not just one time.
2-drink.
Oh, 2-drink maximum. That would be anytime they had a specific different play.
So it's an amendment to the ordinance,
Amendment to the
not a
ordinance.
special event or
Oh, no,
request.
the ordinance right now is beer and wine. We're amending it to put liquor, one type of liquor drink for the theater, and then we're having our own if we have our similar events. Our ordinance right now has beer and wine. We're going to amend ours as well to put the one specialty drink in, themed drinks.
So by amending the village's, the rules for the village, would that be for each restaurant to be able to have their own specialty
No.
drink? Or just
No.
one at the event?
Just, am I right, Alice? This
Yes.
is what came through?
This isn't for restaurants,
Right.
Marty, where this is for events it's at the theater and like at the Tower Green and things like that, correct?
Correct, like Winter Wonderland and Fall
Okay.
Festival as well.
The restaurants have a different liquor code. They can,
So, this
Right.
is separate.
this
Okay,
is just
fair
for
enough.
events, theater or our.
Right, I'm just
Winter
wondering,
Wonderland.
if restaurants who are at the event, does this open it up for them as well, or unless they already have that?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yes,
Yeah.
it would. It would, for example, if someone wanted to do something like the margarita that's referenced in here, they would be able to request that. And one of the things to note too that was brought up at the Liquor Commission is that each time Attorney Drusick provides a recommendation for them, a draft recommendation, or the draft ordinance that comes to you, there's typically a line in there that he puts that says conditions with a question mark. So each time they come through with the menu and the layout of the event, that would be one of those details that you could look at and say, okay, you can't have 5 of these, you can have 1 each time, for each event or for each vendor possibly.
Right.
So that would be vetted, I guess is my point.
Okay.
If that helps a little.
It does.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I do have an additional matter under other, and it's regarding the C-Spar room. The C-Spar room that we've all discussed and we approved it, but they're starting the construction on the C-Spar room this Monday. We need to have a contract in place between our board and I think it's called Contract Solutions. We won't have it in place by Monday, but we'll have it in place subsequent to that, and then it'll be retroactive. And Alex, did you want to explain this in more detail?
Yep, so last month, the board did approve the construction bid, the resolution, and the agreement with the C-Spar Sensory Room. So now we just have to have the contract with Construction Solutions to actually be able to construct the room, and they want to start sooner than later.
So they'll start on Monday, but we'll actually have it on the omnibus in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. It's just a matter of timing.
right.
Yeah.
Other than that, that's all I would have.
Thank you very much, Trustee Terrell. Okay, moving on to consideration of an action on agenda items during the special meeting portion of the combined meeting. Starting with the explanation of the omnibus voting procedure. The Illinois state statutes allow a municipality to collectively vote on a group of ordinances, resolutions, and other motions such as awards of contract, appointments, etc. This is known as an omnibus vote. All the items contained on the omnibus vote list have been previously discussed by the President and Board of Trustees on at least one occasion and often on several occasions. By placing them on the omnibus vote list, a single vote may be taken to approve them. A trustee may remove any item from the list and have it discussed and voted on separately prior to the omnibus vote. Is there any such request this evening? Hearing none, Trustee Terrell.
President Gallagher, I move that the following ordinances, resolutions, and motions as contained on the meeting agenda for February 10th, 2020 be adopted and/or approved under an omnibus vote. Agenda item number 7, Resolution 20-2527 to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the League of Women Voters. Agenda item number 8, Resolution 20-2528, calling for an amendment of the Illinois Small Cell Deployment Act to return control of local right-of-ways to local municipalities, or in the alternative, to repeal of the act. Agenda item number 9, Resolution 20-2529, supporting federal bills H.R. 530 and S. 2012 to restore local control and 5G/broadband deployment.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? Clerk Horvath, may we have the roll call vote, please?
Yes, Madam President. Trustee Terrell.
Aye.
Trustee Sifferman.
Aye.
Trustee Rudolph.
Aye.
Trustee John.
Aye.
Trustee Fink.
Aye.
Trustee Chen.
Aye.
And President Gallagher.
Aye.
All three resolutions have been adopted.
Thank you. Any other business this evening? Moving on to reports then. Just a reminder that our March board meetings will be consolidated into one meeting due to travel plans in March. We did not have a quorum for the second meeting, so we've combined them now to one meeting on March 16th. Also, on January 28th, CMAP, Council of Mayors Executive Committee, held a meeting, and that's where we were advised of the change in federal funding that I've discussed previously with each of you that may impact the underpass and Central Avenue projects. The change affects every COG, every council of government in the region, so it affects essentially every municipality in the region. Our planning liaison with the West Central Municipal Conference is working with others to present a united front as we address the issue. However, we have been advised to continue with our plans, and so that is why we're continuing ahead with the April letting for the underpass. Also at that meeting, we approved renewal of the planning liaison program, which is funded with federal planning dollars. Our planning liaison for the Central Council is Mike Fricano with the West Central Municipal Conference. CMAPS, that's the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, also identified fiscal year 2021 planning projects for the Northeastern region. Of interest to us is a Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus project to develop a guidebook for municipal staff and elected officials regarding implementing electric vehicle infrastructure and challenges and plans for that. So that'll be coming forth in 2021, and that should be a good blueprint for us as we look into that. Another interesting project scheduled through the CMAP funding project is an MWRD project for 2 municipalities to participate in the MWRD's Stormwater Master Planning Program. Central Council currently has the funding already for a stormwater regional plan for the 15 communities contained within Central Council, and we will be working together with MWRD as a region as we develop the stormwater plan. And that will be another layer on top of our transportation regional plan that we just completed in December. Also, CMAP staff gave an update on railroad grade separation projects and crossing improvements. Delays have increased over the past few years due to an increase in the number and length of trains passing through. I know I've noticed it, probably all of us have noticed that you sit at the crossings a little bit longer. CMAP has identified 47 priority projects in the Northeast region, which includes Chicago and the suburbs. Crossings in Berwyn, River Grove, Riverside, Downers Grove, and LaGrange Park have all been identified as priority crossings. Also, the Federal Railroad Administration has set up a webpage for users to report blocked crossings. It's a little unusual that they have the users reporting these instead of the train companies, but it does give us an outlet to report when we're delayed for a significant amount of time. And you can do that by going to www.fra.dot.gov//blocked crossings. On January 29th, we held the West Central Municipal Conference Joint Transportation Committee meeting here in Western Springs. That's a quarterly meeting. Reports from transit and transportation agencies were heard. PACE reported that they did not have a fare increase for 2020. And they had planned to eliminate Route 669, which actually serves Western Springs, but due to user feedback, consumer feedback, they decided to keep that route in service. So that route runs 3 buses between 6 and or in the morning and 5 buses in the afternoon. So if you're interested in catching the bus to get to the train station, you can go on the PACE website and get the actual time frame. Metra also reported that there's no fare increase in 2020 for Metra. It also reported 95% on-time performance for 2019. Now that positive train control is in place, they hope to improve upon that number in 2020. They're set to purchase new engines, and they guaranteed that some of those engines will be used along the BNSF line. The tollway also gave a report and ran a video that shows how the shoe fly will take place and the steps to tear it down and build it back up. Pile driving has begun, and railroad construction is scheduled to begin late summer or early summer, late spring, early summer. We're thinking around August, but more to come on that. IDOT submitted a schedule on proposed roadway improvements that is included in the materials here that I'm passing along. And finally, our consultant on that transportation regional plan that I mentioned earlier was completed at the end of 2019. This plan is comprehensive across the entire Central Council area and identifies projects for each community and steps the community can take to enhance the point system and maximize grant funding for potential transportation projects. The data is also GIS mapped, so that makes it very portable, and it allows it to be updated as conditions change. This plan is the model that the stormwater sewer plan will follow, but it is also a model, it's the first of its kind to have this kind of regional mapping and planning take place. And on Saturday, Trustee Chen, Manager Velkme, and Director Turi and I attended the WCMC Legislative Breakfast along with Attorney Jerusik and 300 other close personal friends. Leader Durkin and the new Senate President Don Harmon shared the stage and spoke of the importance of working together to build on the progress made last year. Congressman Danny Davis and Mike Quigley both spoke of challenges facing Congress right now, but they both hoped for a brighter future. Manager Velkme sent the WCMC's legislative priorities to you in an email today, but I would like to highlight a few of those as they relate to Western Springs. One is restoring the local government distributive fund revenue back to a full 10%. That's the amount we used to get. It was changed several years ago down to 7.5%, and we're hoping to crawl back up to the 10%. There seems to be some support for that from our legislators going forward, so maybe 2020 is the year. There's also an initiative to eliminate administrative fees on local sales taxes. Those fees also were recently introduced, right, Grace, about at the same time. So it was a double hit, but we're hoping to have support for that. There's also an initiative there to support non-home rule sales tax authority in a 1/4 of a percentage point increments up to 1%. And the WCMC is also supporting ending federal preemption of state, preemption of state and local control over the deployment of small cell wireless facilities. And that concludes my report. Manager Valtney?
I believe you covered many of my
Oh, I'm
points.
sorry.
No,
I should
no
have
problem.
coordinated.
No. But I would like to remind everyone that we do have the town hall meeting set for 7 o'clock at the Lyons Township Corral. So please come out for that so that we can have a very productive discussion on 5G. So, thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Jerusik?
No further report tonight.
Thank you. In that case, I'd like to entertain a motion to recess to closed session.
Oh, I make a motion that we move to closed session.
For the purposes.
Oh, I have to read it.
For A. Can she just say A?
Should I read it?
Yeah.
Okay. I move that we recess to close meeting for the purpose of discussion of A, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. May we have a roll call vote, please? Clerk Horvath?
Yes, Madam President. Trustee Rudolph.
Aye.
Trustee Sifferman.
Aye.
Trustee Terrell.
Aye.
Trustee Chen.
Aye.
Trustee Fink.
Aye.
And Trustee John.
Aye.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in closed session. We will only discuss the item referenced by Trustee Chen in her motion. And when we return to open session, it will only be for the purpose of concluding our meeting. Thank you and good evening.
Collective bargaining.